All right, what's up, guys? Magus here. Today we're going to go over the concept of auction market theory, commonly abbreviated as ATM. Before I get into it, I want to give a quick shout out to both Tommy and Sting, who had a pivotal role in my development as a trader this year. And this concept that we're going to go over really plays a massive role in how I do things and how I'm not driving my bias and making my decisions. So, let's go ahead and get right into it. Introduction to auction market theory. So starting off, we're going to make the point that all markets have two types of participants. There is the passive participant and the aggressive participant. The passive participant is the market maker. They're the person that enables a market to work because they either put something up to buy an item or put something up to sell an item, the offer or the bid, right? And the aggressive participant is the market taker. They're the person that when there's an offer or a bid, they come and take that to get in position. Okay. So we're all familiar with market orders and limit orders by now, but this dynamic plays out in every type of market, no matter how complicated or simple it is. So it's important to think about that and understand that because that ultimately is what is going to drive price. So when you have these participants, ultimately market is seeking value through the auction process, and we'll explain that a little bit further as we go down. But I want to make the point before we go talk about the individual market types that this dynamic is cyclical as markets move between acceptance. So when value is accepted, you're going to get these range-bound environments where price is going to be quote unquote balanced. And when you get these rejections from value, that's where you're going to get the trend or an imbalance. Now, the reason why it's cyclical is because every market is going to flow between this process of accepting value and rejecting value. As more and more buyers and sellers on either end of the market come in, you're going to have what is determined as fair value is going to shift. And as it shifts, you're going to sometimes have acceptance of value and sometimes have rejection from value. And this ultimately is what leads to range bound environments versus trending environments. So, going ahead to just talk about the most simple type of market where there's just a simple basic market maker and market taker. Let's say you just turned 16, you've been working your job at the grocery store, you saved up a couple $1,000s, and you want to buy a car. Your uncle just so happens to have a car that he doesn't need anymore, so he's going to make you an offer. He is the market maker, and you're the market taker in this environment. So he says he'll sell you the car for $1,500 and you say, all right, that sounds right. I looked it up. That's pretty much fair value because the market will tell you that, right? You could just go and simply look on the internet and see what fair value for that is when you're considering all the attributes like what the quality of the car is, how old it is, how well it was taken care of, all these things. Now you know what fair value is, and okay, well, he's offering me a price in fair value. Maybe since he's your uncle, he gives you a little bit lower than fair value offer because he wants to help you out, and you're going to go ahead and take that. So he made the market and you took from the market. Simple beginnings of a market. So moving on to a more complicated market, we're going to use the Amazon marketplace where there's multiple makers and multiple takers. So because you have multiple people that can put offers to sell these items and you have multiple people that can put out orders to buy these items, now the idea of supply and demand really comes into play. Because simply put, when supply is high, there's a lot of supply, you're likely not going to have demand to meet supply. And vice versa, when demand is high, you're likely not going to be able to meet the supply of the demand. So this dynamic is what makes markets move. So, for example, we're going to use another car example just because it's the easiest one off the top of my head. And since I'm just winging this as we go. So, you're a car dealer and you have 50 of this very popular truck, and we're selling the truck at $30,000. But we've noticed at our dealership that lately we haven't been able to sell as many of these trucks as we'd like, and we're ending up sitting on a lot of supply. So how we, as the market makers, are going to fix this to make sure that we're able to continue to make money and sell more of these trucks is we're likely going to drop the price because we have more supply than demand currently. So it was originally 30,000 and maybe we're going to drop it to 25 right now. We're going to do some ridiculous sale and we're going to do some advertising and people are going to think they're coming and getting a great deal. And meanwhile, we're still making plenty of markup. They just don't know it. So we're selling the truck for 25,000. We originally had, what did I say, 50 of these trucks. We got 50 of these trucks. We were just able to sell 15 of them really quickly. Boom, boom, boom. We sold 15 of them because the market realized, hey, fair value for this truck is 30,000, but they're only asking 25. It really makes sense for me to go buy this right now, right? So they're going to go start to buy it. And what's going to happen now is that your supply is lower because you just sold part of your inventory, but demand has now picked up. So now that demand has picked up, more people want to buy it, but there's less trucks available. So what's going to happen? We're going to raise the price back up. We're going to bump it back up to the original price of 30. And often, how markets work is that because that original influx of demand has just come in now when price was lower, now that price has moved up, people are likely still going to continue to buy this. That's just how financial markets work. It might not necessarily be the case with a vehicle as much, but certainly with financial markets. So now we've moved the price back up to $30,000 and we've sold some of our inventory, and people keep wanting to buy this. Well, why not bump up the price a little bit? So now we're going to move up the price to 35 because the market clearly accepted that it was way too good of a price at 25 and now the market likes it at 30. So let's test it at 35 because we're the market makers, we can do what we want. So we're going to quote 35. And what's going to happen in this simple example is you're going to have less demand come in now because the vehicle you're selling is being sold at a higher value than what is perceived as fair value. So fair value is $30,000 and we're selling it at 35. Now, granted, you probably will get some people to buy, but demand will fall off. And ultimately, this dynamic that I'm depicting right here is what makes price swing up and down. When things are cheap, people want to buy them, and when things are expensive, they want to sell them. So this ebb and flow creates this cyclical nature of balance and imbalance, or acceptance of value and rejection of value. Okay? So without going in on a too long-winded of a rant here, we're gonna sum it up there pretty much because that ultimately explains what's happening with price. So we'll use a candlestick chart um, to explain this, and I even have a real life trade example that I can use right here. So from the 21st to the 24th, I decided with my own system and my own approach that fair value for Bitcoin was between 18.7 and 18.2. So when we broke from that, right, we're considering this acceptance of value. Price tried to move up and accept up here, and it formed a new value between these two lines. This is value. Now, this isn't a true value line, but it just happens to be a price action line that lines up pretty well with value. So you have value formed. The demand was high. The bidders felt that it could go up, so we ran it up. We formed new value. Value rejected from here, and we got a large breakdown. And as price trended back up, my trade system was once we get acceptance into this old value, that we're going to sweep the highs. So what happens? I'm not going to be long in here. I'm not going to be long in here. I'm going to wait for us to survive. I'm going to use my context and order flow. I got some market orders filled here. I just hammered in. I woke up first, really early in the morning. Alerts went off. I hammered in. I stayed up for a couple hours. What do you know? We ran it up, and I was able to take profit on this. I sized down pretty dramatically on it. So I wanted to give a little bit of a trade example for what I'm talking about here. That ultimately I'm using order flow to establish what fair value is, and when we trade within fair value, I'm expecting a bracketing environment, and when we reject from it, I'm going to expect a trending environment. Reacceptance into value is very actionable, so it's something to pay attention to. And yeah, just to summarize, I am deriving these levels from the TPO chart. But you ultimately could do the same thing with the candlestick. It's pretty obvious that you're just finding the ranges, you're marking out the ranges, and you could trade this just like a price action trader. When you form a range and you break down from the range, you want a short bias. When you break up from a range, you want a long bias. Um, Reacceptance into a value like this, you want a long bias. And I do expect to maintain a long bias depending on how our reaction in the lower 19s is today or tomorrow. So that pretty much does it, guys. Just to summarize a little bit here, auction market theory explains the idea of how a market auctions back and forth because the market participants of a maker and taker, how their relationship is balanced, and how supply and demand plays into it, because when you have increased supply, right, you're likely not going to have the demand to fill the supply, and vice versa, that when you have a lot of demand and limited supply, the price is going to go up. This is the simple argument behind Bitcoin ultimately, is that it has a fixed supply, and the supply is ever increasingly going to become limited because there's only X amount that will ever be produced, and likely a lot of them will be lost. So this is ultimately the argument behind Bitcoin right here, supply and demand. Okay, guys, thank you.